Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of Severance Season 2, Episode 5, Trojan's Horse. A phrase uttered by Ricken, but a concept that applies to several invasive threats this episode, including in watermelon form. And I think I might have figured out why they punctuated it this way, like Trojan apostrophe S? Who is really the Trojan of this episode? I'm here to analyze this episode scene by scene to break down every creepy detail, easy to miss clue, and overwrought reference to religion, philosophy, and Lost, which for me are all the same thing. And before we begin, something I have to point out from episode 4 that I'm kicking myself for forgetting. The name Dieter Egan was referenced in the real outside world of the show. In episode 2 of the season, Milchick rode that cool motorcycle past a bar where a band named Dieter's brother was on the bill. And Dieter's brother is, of course, Keir. We open with the squeaky wheels of a pushcart, a fitting opening shot for an episode titled Trojan's Horse, as it recalls that clever Odysseus constructing a wooden horse within which he and his fellow soldiers hid to be wheeled inside of the city of Troy and then sack the city from the inside out. This will all be covered, I'm sure, in Christopher Nolan's Odyssey movie next summer. But of course, a Trojan's horse is also a common metaphor for any offer that appears altruistic on the surface but contains some harmful fine print, or in computing, a term for malware that disguises itself as a normal program. So is Helly the Trojan horse? Is the Irving watermelon head one? Is Outie Burt a Trojan horse? Is Ragabi a Trojan horse? Who is horsing around with whom? Well, pushing this cart is a mysterious whistler. This whistled tune is called The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, a 1976 song by Gordon Lightfoot memorializing the tragic sinking of the SS Edmund Fitzgerald on Lake Superior in 1975, in which 29 men lost their lives, and it remains the largest ship to ever sink on the Great Lakes. And this, we must note, is another instance of the state of Michigan and the Great Lakes on this show. Mark W. says that he broke a lease in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and then the painting, Keir invites you to drink of his water, has Keir Egan overlooking some bodies of water that resemble the shape of the Great Lakes, but would obviously have to be much smaller than those Great Lakes are. So I don't know, after episode 4's Ortbo excursion, I feel like we might be somewhere in Michigan's Upper Peninsula or in Canada. But this is also a song about a shipwreck, thus Lightfoot composing it as a sea shanty. And I'm also reminded of Irving's past in the Navy and how this episode has Milchick saying that he went out on a long cruise. We focus on a series of drawers, and first it feels like, are we in a morgue? And Milchick's execute drawer system on his office computer in episode 3 feels like it might be connected to these drawers, but we are in optics and design, approaching Felicia and Elizabeth. Remember these two, and this figure is here to retrieve what looks like some dental instruments. We only see this man from a distance or behind shelving, but the closed captioning calls him Doctor. He seems to be dressed as a dentist. And in the credits, there is only one actor named for this episode without any other appearance during the runtime, Robbie Benson, an actor in his late 60s whom you might best know as the voice of the Beast in Disney's Beauty and the Beast, and in that movie's direct-to-video sequels, and in the Kingdom Hearts games. I don't know, you be the judge.
To heaven. Thank you.
But first, you have to close your eyes. It's a surprise.
This episode never comes back to the whistling Lumon dentist, but since he goes down the exports hall, I feel like his job might be to Frankenstein some corpses back to life using these surgical tools, and Lumon needs O&D to design these tools uniquely for each corpse that MDR is working to respark the soul of. I could be completely wrong in these theories. That's just where my brain is right now. We should also note that the down elevator at the end of the exports hall also dings after the doors close. That would mean that something happens to anyone who travels down that elevator. It could be another form of a severed transition, or it could just be anything else. So we catch up with Outie Mark, who's now taking a regimen of pills after starting his reintegration procedure. We see blue and black capsules, white pills, canary yellow pills, dark blue capsules, black capsules, and light blue capsules. Yeah, again, we are kind of sticking with the color scheme of MDR. We should also note that this might be our best look yet at Mark's smartphone that we've gotten, at least the hardware of it. And while it is a modern smartphone with a touchscreen, it's not any generation of iPhone I know of. And that's just a very interesting detail for the show because it is on Apple TV Plus, and on their shows, everybody uses iPhones except this show. And I think that must have been a battle that Ben Stiller and Dan Erickson had to fight for a specific reason. Devin calls asking about the weekend thing, and Mark says that he was told his innie fell off a rope and that's why he was wet. So this confirms that we are now after the Ortbo in episode 4, and that trip did occur after Mark's reintegration, but that the reintegration is a process that is taking some time to fully set in. So the Ortbo really began with the Outies being told that they were participating in a weekend trip. Now, from this line alone, I would say, at least for now, there's not enough information to know whether they truly were outside or in some kind of Lumen-controlled environment, be it a simulated danger room or just like some kind of enclosure that they controlled. But that now has us wondering, does Lumen really own that many acres of national forest in the Kier PE vicinity? Does Lumen really name that park Dieter Egan National Forest if Dieter Egan wasn't even known to exist? It might have just been a ghost story invented to scare innies into proper behavior. Also, if that Ortbo truly did go down outside, how does that explain all the impossible things that the innies experienced in episode 4? The TV randomly on the cliff with no cord powering it. The shadow selves not at all dressed for outdoor environments. Irving not getting hypothermia despite falling asleep overnight. Irving's bizarre dream. And of course, the frozen seal. And I did not connect this last episode, but a lot of you are pointing out that this might have been a reference to the Montauk monster, which is kind of an urban myth / anomaly from the aughts, some kind of creepy creature that washed up onto the shores of Montauk. The fact that this thing that they called a seal did not have any discernible face makes me think that it was a reference to the Montauk monster. Still, what the hell was that and what was it doing there? Well, we will be trying to answer these questions as we go. But for now, Mark drinks from one of these 9 bottles of some yucky looking fluid. I'm hoping that it's some kind of pineapple juice mixed with coconut milk and those chunks inside of it are just like pulp or ice crystals, but based on the bad smell, I'm thinking it might be some kind of milk and those might be curds of that milk. Could it be goat milk? Whatever this is the same fluid that gets spilled in the new season 2 opening credits. Grakappan has been living with Mark to continue his reintegration treatments.
I haven't remembered anything else.
Right. Well, maybe he already has.
This suggests that Outie Mark remembered his Innie's first introduction to PD, and that's it. Meanwhile, we got a clue in episode 4 that Innie Mark knew some of the little things, like Irving's experience on the outside via his Outie's chat with Milchick. But Innie Mark wasn't actively deceiving anyone last episode. From his perspective, it was all still setting in, and he had bits of context that he didn't have before, and he did occasionally see Helena as Gemma. In a much more crowded Lumen upper floor, Helena Egan meets with Mr. Drummond and Natalie. She asks if she'll be updating Father later, capital F in the closed captions. And later in the scene, Drummond refers to Jane Egan, I assume, the same way.
And Father approves.
Father encouraged it.
Which makes me think that Drummond is either also part of the family, or maybe Jane Egan has like a Führer-esque cult loyalty within the company. Drummond says that the medical team said her tempers will rebalance quickly, which suggests that whatever quack doctors they have internally at Lumen measure things like trauma through their 4 tempers: woe, frolic, dread, and malice. And those are the most important things to anyone's mental health. Drummond recommends another obligement session, which Helena refuses, and now we're wondering what horrific things Lumen does on the outside to settle the nerves of hysteric patients. We learn that Mark is 81% done with the Cold Harbor file, and that Mark needs Helena's Innie to finish the job. Helena says that the Innies are animals, but Drummond reminds us.
And the work is mysterious and important.
Mark described their work this same way to Helly in season 1, episode 4.
Work is bullshit.
The work is mysterious and important. And we deal with the uncertainty it brings us in the way that Kier would have wanted. Together. As a family.
And I have always interpreted the use of the word mysterious as a reference to the phrase God works in mysterious ways, an acknowledgement of faith by Christians that mortals are not meant to know all the divine inner workings of life. Helena transitions to Helly R with a Zolly effect on her face and a bing, which makes this the first time any Helly R has been back on the severed floor since leaving Mark with a kiss before the override. The doors open on Miss Huang sitting perfectly framed in front of the Kier Pardons His Betrayers painting with her head exactly in between the front betrayer, whom I assume is a Confederate soldier, but I don't know for sure, and then Kier Egan with the Civil War era sword. Before Helly follows Miss Huang, she does stop to take in this painting for a moment. These shots of Helly R are all shot on a handheld rig with just a bit of a shake to them, a contrast to the mounted, clean shots of Helena upstairs and the smooth Steadicam shots of Mark when he was in this lobby earlier this season. And I think it's just a cool way to show the heightened sense of confusion and chaos that Helly R feels right now. Helena dressed Helly R to be in a fully loyal MDR blue, a solid blue dress and conservative blue heels. In Milchick's office, remember, since he moved in, he has put up this photo of an iceberg, which is a symbolic reflection of what Lumen is doing to severed persons. One half visible above the surface, but a whole other half half, or sometimes way more than that, underneath the surface. And it's that unseen lower part that makes icebergs so deadly. Certainly worth noting for an episode that begins with a song about a famous shipwreck. I'm just interested in this scene perfectly framing Milchick right in front of the upper part of the iceberg, and the framing of Miss Huang directly in front of that part of the Kier painting. Milchick says,
Irving B's Outie has departed on an elongated cruise voyage.
I don't give 3 dry f***s about his Outie.
3 dry f***. After Mark and Helly's dry bump in episode 4, I'm wondering if we'll get like a total of 3 this season. Milchick telling them that Irving is on a cruise, of course, reminds us both of Irving's Navy days, and I would say the creepy Sea Org of the Church of Scientology. Milchick tells them the story of Grakappan, aka Greycoat, a term for the Swedish Charles VI in the late 17th century who went incognito in a kind of undercover boss mission. King Charles VI of Sweden was a real historical figure who actually did this, but there's just some things to unpack here. First off, Milchick says this was, quote, in ancient times, but late 17th century Sweden was hardly ancient. After Milchick saying that the waterfall in episode 4 was the tallest in the world, it's just another example of this guy clearly reading from some warped Lumon edited textbooks. Also, the way Milchick says old gray robe.
He would don an old gray robe.
Feels like a particularly mean dig at Helly R, if Helly R is meant to be the disguise in this analogy. And Milchick says that Kier Egan did this in his ether factories, and Helena Egan is carrying on this noble tradition. Of course, Kier just did a wardrobe-based undercover boss move, but Helena had used the Glasgow block for this. And it's just another example of every descendant within the Egan family kind of having a similar MO, like they might be one diluted, diminishing, returned version of the same soul. But Glasgow block. Let's talk about this, because after last week's breakdown, a lot of you brought to my attention the Glasgow Coma Scale, which is a neurological assessment tool used to evaluate the level of consciousness after a brain injury. They measure eye opening, verbal response, and motor response. So presumably they derive the term of Glasgow block from that to describe the full-on blocking of an additional consciousness from surfacing in settings which they should. We should also note that Glasgow was one of the listed options in the security room alongside override contingency in season 1. The other options on that screen included beehive, branch transfer, clean slate, elephant, freeze frame, goldfish, lullaby, and open house. Milchick says that the plan was for Irving B to not come back, and he shows them their new tri-station in the MDR room. In the past, Lumon would bring in replacements to sit in the cube when an opening came up, like when PD left, Helly R filled that spot. When Dylan and Irving were temporarily fired, Lumon brought in 3 new faces. But by committing now to a reorganized tri-station, it's kind of like saying that Mark's work is most focused with only these other 2, and not like a third newcomer brought in who might distract him. Like they're only 90% away from Cold Harbor, and they're like, let's just finish it. No more experiments. But it also means that instead of a square 90-degree angle configuration, the 3 of them are all now in a 120-degree peace sign configuration, in which there's like a central equilateral triangle where all 3 could join hands if they wanted. I'm just obsessed with the geography and numerical symbolism on this show. Like we kind of have a holy trinity now of Peter, Paul, and Mary. And I feel like in a way, Lumon might have made these 3 remaining innies resolves stronger by removing one of their numbers and not giving them a new 4th replacement on whom they could pile all of their anger. Dylan demands a funeral for Irving, and Mark only half-heartedly commits to a quick one. Mark, you'll notice, is coughing, perhaps an effect of reintegration or an outdoor Ortbo weekend or both. Milchick radios to Miss Huang for a bereavement kit. He used this walkie last episode to remove the Glasgow block, which suggests that wherever Woe's Hollow actually is must be close enough for a shortwave radio to connect back to the security room. Mark examines himself in the bathroom mirror, and we hear this sound effect.
Mark?
We heard a similar sound earlier this episode when the dentist unlocked the security door. We also heard it during Petey's reintegration sickness in season 1. Helly finds Mark in the bathroom, recreating his check-in with her in the same location throughout season 1. We get some great shot composition here with Helly framed both to the left of Mark and her mirror reflection framed to the right of Mark, which is just a cool way to show the split natures of her consciousness and Mark's inability to trust either now. Poor Helly R has been sidelined for the first half of the season, so it's just kind of sad for her to be judged by Mark for her existence as Helena Egan that is not at all the fault of the innie. Today's video is sponsored by Blue Chew. February is the time when it feels like the greeting card industry really wants you to focus on love, and that's great, but some relationships are about lust, and that means February is a good month to pick up Blue Chew. Blue Chew is a unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but in chewable tablets and at a fraction of the cost. Blue Chew's tablets are made in the USA and prepared and shipped direct to your door in a discreet package. It's super easy too. Just sign up at bluechew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. It's all done online. That means no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversations, and no waiting in line at the pharmacy. You can take Blue Chew anytime, day or night. That way you can plan ahead or be ready for whenever an opportunity arises. If you're skeptical or don't think you need it, try it free for a month and see. Make life easier by getting harder and discover your options at bluechew.com. And we've got a special deal for our viewers. Try your first month of Blue Chew free. Visit bluechew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring our channel. In the back closet, which is the same location where Milchick hid his black Kier Egan art, Milchick and Miss Huang prep for the funeral. Milchick has mugs for each of them, the same kind of two-fingered handheld mug that we see for Irv in the new season 2 opening credits. And I suppose this means that they're already planning on future bereavements or retirements for all of them. They even have one for Helly, even though she is the Helena Egan, I guess to follow the protocol for all innies having the same cultural experience if that day ever comes. Miss Huang says,
"May I say a question?"
May I say a question? That's some odd wording. You should say, may I ask a question? But I think it sets up her following declarative statement that Seth shouldn't let them hold a funeral. Obviously, this is part of Miss Huang playing some teen games with an adult, clearly threatening his status, asking now if today is indeed his performance review. So the funeral takes place in the new break room. This is where they watch the stop motion animation video in season 2, episode 1. We see now a 16-bit animation of Irving walking in front of a red curtain to a funereal theme. He waves and then scratches his head, gestures that John Turturro would do as Irving. Later, actually, this animation dances, and it looks like they might have tracked his dance moves from the Defiant Jazz dance party in season 1. The dot matrix pages that Miss Huang were printing out list Irving as lasting from quarter 870 to quarter 882. So if we assume that these are financial quarters, and that would be a big assumption, it also mean like 220.5 total years of Lumon's existence if we're on quarter 882. And if the company was founded in 1865, that would mean we are in the year 2085 of the show. I don't know if that's the case because we know James Egan took over the CEO position starting in 2003. Maybe we're in a future where they really slowed down aging. But also we got a reminder that these innies have zero understanding of the outside world. So maybe these quarter numbers are just kind of arbitrary or dishonest, designed to confuse them. Maybe the severed floor tracks time differently. We just have to remember that Felicia did say in episode 3 that she worked with Burt for 6 years, and she used years. Some of the break room posters that we saw in episode 1 are still there, including Grin and Baird It, or Baird Egan. Also Hang In There, which we'll come back to later this episode. But I don't see that cool poster with Kier Egan as a B. Dylan eulogizes Irving as a guy who tried to shame him once over watering down the toner by playing a printer toner prank on his mug. Why would they have ever needed to water down ink toner, I wonder? But Miss Huang rolls in a fruit cart with Irving's head carved out of a Malaysian Black Beauty watermelon. But I think what's most offensive about this is that they carved cantaloupe bowls to hold bald honeydew and honeydew bowls to hold bald cantaloupe. Honeydew is just a crime against nature. But it's yet another example of a wheeled-in gift in this Trojan's horse episode. Milchick doesn't let Miss Huang perform the theremin song that she had practiced, instead leaves the three alone to listen to Robert Mitchum's Coconut Water as they chow down on some Irving watermelon. When Mark leaves the party early, Dylan spills the beans to Helly that Miss Casey is Mark's Outie's wife, and rather than just talk this out with Helly, Mark snaps that there's no point because Lumon is smarter than they are. They know their every move, but not because of obvious surveillance methods that are applied to them. He says because Helena Egan told them. He's still too trusting of Lumon to not suspect that they have cameras and microphones everywhere, and he would rather scapegoat Helena. And from here we get a really cool cross dissolve as Natalie fades into the spot where Helly was once standing, still facing Mark in this superimposition, while Mark fades out where Milchick steps in to the same spot of frame. I think this draws a structural parallel between these two pairings. Both pairs are equal status prisoners of Lumon who should be aligned in their interests, but are being opposed nonetheless due to this company playing games with all of them. Milchick asks Natalie how she felt when she received the Black Kier paintings and the somewhat complicated feelings they evoke, but she has no response to the similar challenges Seth says they shared. Once again, her stoicness suggests that she has some kind of gun to her head. As I pointed out last week, Irving's final words of "hang in there" to Dylan were a reference to the "hang in there" poster in the break room. This poster is actually a depiction of Dylan from the end of season 1 in that security room holding both switches at the same time, which makes it kind of creepy that now it's being depicted as like a guy trying to hang on to 2 rock wall surfaces before falling to his death. And at the bottom of this poster reads, "This motivational sentiment has been provided by Lumon management. Enjoy." So yes, in a way, they are using Dylan's heroic act as this kind of in-office propaganda to make the innies believe Lumon made their reforms, but the art of it is a very clear threat. And behind this poster, Irving had hidden a drawing of the exports hall and written instructions of how to find it. Presumably, this was written and hidden by Irving after his conversation with Felicia in episode 3, since these directions begin at O&D. The instructions read, "From O&D, first turn right all the way down the hall and turn right, turn left down a long hall and turn left, turn right, right, left, right, left, right, left, down, long hall and turn right, then left, right, turn right once more time, and all the way down a long hallway." Yes, researcher Noah actually sketched this out, and it does sort of move in one general direction. Mr. Drummond tells Milchick that his performance review could last anywhere between 2 and 6 hours, depending on the number of atonements and approbations required, and if it takes longer than 4 hours, there will be a break for lunch with the order taken in advance.
Well, I hope that won't be necessary.
Here is the lunch menu.
Oof. The producers did note in the behind the scenes podcast that severed employees are supposed to fill out weekly lunch menus and turn it in every Monday morning, and that those meals show up prepared every day in the kitchenette. We just haven't seen that on the show. So Milchick essentially is being put through the same very humbling process. Drummond reads that Milchick's attendance and urinalysis are good. And at first I was like, oh, gross, they're tracking their urine, before I realized, wait, a lot of white collar companies do this with urine drug testing. Now, in this shot of the 3 of them, Natalie is interestingly reflected both in the right wall and in the ceiling, whereas Drummond and Milchick aren't cleanly reflected in the shot. While she very clearly does not seem to be severed, she does seem to be like a possible puppet for like multiple members of the board. Drummond criticizes Seth's kindness reforms and Ortbo retreat.
You arranged an outdoor retreat and team-building occurrence.
Now, the word outdoor is just part of the Ortbo acronym, so while Drummond says the word outdoor, we still don't really know if it was actually outside somewhere or a simulated danger room on a different floor of the Lumon facility. A side note here, while that would have required a tremendous amount of electricity to pull off the visual effects of that to these innies, remember episode 3 did end with Mark parked beside some massive electricity towers that seemed way too big for a town as small as Kier PE, so I wondered if the Lumon facility might need some massive surge of electrical power in order to power something, and a simulation dome could be that thing. Mark, meanwhile, flips through some other project files and we see the words Yakima. That's a town in Washington. There is a Yakima River, and this town is actually where the 1959 Western film The Hanging Tree was shot. We see Allentown, of course, a city in Pennsylvania, also located along a river. Allentown, also the name of a Billy Joel song. Astoria could be referring to Astoria, Oregon, the setting of The Goonies. Astoria is also the name of a part of Queens in New York City along the East River. Bellingham is a city in Washington State where Western Washington University is located. Cairns is a tropical city in northeastern Australia. And then Chicxulub is the name of the impact crater of the asteroid that theoretically killed the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. There is a coastal town along that crater as well called the Chicxulub Pueblo. And then cielo means sky or heaven in Spanish. We're not really sure about this one. There's like an El Cielo biosphere reserve, a nature reserve in Mexico. There's like a lot of different places that are called cielo, so we don't really know. And then finally to Cold Harbor, Mark's super important file related to Gemma in some way, also the name of the Civil War battle. We talked about that back in episode 2. All of these towns border some body of water, just like Montauk, Irving's file. Then again, most towns and cities in the world border some body of water, whether it's an ocean or a gulf, a bay, lake, river, spring. So I don't really know if that's anything. It's just really hard to know what details in the show are significant and which are just specific and fun, but ultimately random choices. Drummond says,
Mark Scout's completion of Cold Harbor will be remembered as one of the greatest moments in the history of this planet.
Whoa, okay, so for now I am sticking it to the theory that Cold Harbor is designed to unlock the secrets of reincarnating a soul in its most authentic form within a resurrected body, basically unlocking immortality, and that could be why Lumon is so eager for Mark to finish this. But we are now asking, is this something he has been working on since the first episode of the series, or since the first episode of this season? I'll get to why that's an important distinction at the end end of this video. Milchick sits down with his custom printed performance review handbook where the cover lists the core principles of Lumon: vision, verve, wit, cheer, humility, benevolence, and then we see the last three in this shot: nimbleness, probity, and wiles. And these might have been inspired by the 18th century British philosopher David Hume's natural virtues: benevolence, prudence, wit, cheerfulness, good sense, due modesty, courage, and ambition. David Hume was one of the big philosophical influences on Lost and was the namesake of the character Desmond Hume. Milchick opens his handbook to see a nifty infographic-filled page outlining his various failures: short-lived new refining team, ineffective kindness reforms, calamitous Ortbo, and then theft of card 7197G. Milchick also flips to a page listing his most overused words, and I tried to see all of these, but the page turns too fast and I could only see the top ones: solace and supplant. And we did hear Milchick say solace back in episode 2 of the season.
The solace you have given him down there will make its way to you.
Mark glitches in his MDR photo that was photoshopped to remove Irving now flashes to 3 of his reintegration pills: a blue and black capsule, a white pill, and a yellow pill. He sees it's just 4:54 on the analog clock, 6 minutes early, so he leaves, but Milchick confronts Mark in the elevator, making a similar face-to-face framing as the shots we saw earlier, but now Milchick steps way closer to tell him that he knows this.
Did you tell her that you her Outie at the Orpo?
So Milchick is not only tightening the leash, he uses shorter, straightforward profanity, taking the note from his performance review where he was told his words were too long and too complicated. As Outie Mark leaves the office coughing, we see that the back of the head of Helena Egan watches him leave. Devin reads Ricken's rewritten pages from the any targeted version of his book that Natalie pitched him on, and he writes it from the perspective of someone who has witnessed severed employees. He says that he saw none of them having watches of their own, seeing only a clock on the wall, but that isn't true. We know it isn't. Any Mark wears a secondary wristwatch that Outie Mark keeps in the locker. Ricken says his playing along with Nat's wishes is part of his plan.
Well, it's a Trojan's horse. If I can get my ideas to severed workers all across the world, it might beget a revolution.
Trojan's horse, apostrophe S, not Trojan horse. That's the common usage of the phrase. Trojan's horse would mean the gift is not just going to the Trojans, a gift from the Greeks, but a gift horse originating from the Trojans and given back to themselves. Ricken doesn't realize it, but his misuse of the term reflects what is really happening here. This deception, as Ricken sees it, is not like an invasive trick he's pulling on Lumon to bring it down from the inside. It's a gift that Lumon knows about, that started with Lumon to put in the hands of someone else as a gift to give back to them in order to inoculate themselves, using Ricken as like a trustworthy outsider whom they can say they flipped, all as part of a plan to keep the innies trapped. Outie Irving, we see, lives beside some suspension bridge, which I found interesting. He uses that same phone booth once more to call his mystery contact.
I think they know what my innie was up to. I'm telling you to...
Now I'm wondering if his contact might be Ragabi or some other defector from Lumon, and that Irving's Outie has been working against the company. Maybe even Irving could have been one of the recent reintegration patients that Ragabi had worked on. Or it could just be as a senior severed worker and an artist, his brain chemistry could allow him to employ creative thinking, especially in his dreams, that makes connections and find new neural pathways through the severed breach in his brain. Obviously, his dream during the Ortbo was what allowed him to piece together that Helly was actually her Outie, Helena Egan, which was finally confirmed by the waterfall when he said, "Hey kid," and she did not respond with "What's for dinner," which is the common innie catchphrase that Petey would say with them, and we heard throughout season 1.
Let's find out what's for dinner.
Burt finally talks to Irving and asks him why he was at his house, and he says that he was canned a few weeks prior because his innie had had an, quote, unsanctioned erotic relationship with someone. So Burt did not retire as we thought. Lumon let him go. He invites him for a ham dinner with his partner named Fields, and he says that they had to cancel a recent trip to Milwaukee. Another clue. Milwaukee is in Wisconsin and would be a pretty cold place to visit this time of year, but it is a trip south if we are indeed in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, because Milwaukee just a few hours south from certain parts of the UP. Ragabi goes through Gemma's things, finding a necklace. Mark apologizes for not finding eggnog, which is kind of a weird thing for Ragabi to request to drink, but I guess not that weird since we see her housing cake frosting. Eggnog could also go into that gross-looking milky mixture that Mark drinks. The grocery store bag that he holds reads Egan's Emporium. Also in Gemma's box, Gemma herself, her ashes, or so Mark thinks. They're contained in OK PS, Priority Express Mail, cremated remains. Okay, PS. Couple ways to read that. Could be like 2 abbreviations or something, like okay and postscript, or it could be postal service from like Oklahoma, or it could just be like okay postal service, which might, along with the Wet Bandits, be a reference to Home Alone, how they drove a van called OK Plumbing and Heating. And I think that would be reason enough to doubt that these are real. And Ragabi does say that Lumon has the morgue paid off. Mark says,
She's not dead, she's just not here.
these are the same words that as any said about Irving.
Because he's not dead, he's just not here.
So Mark starts to walk up the stairs and he hears Gemma / Miss Casey's voice from the wellness sessions saying nice things about his Outie. Your Outie can parallel park in less than 20 seconds. Now, Miss Casey never said anything like this during the wellness sessions that we heard in season 1, but she did say your Outie can set up a tent in under 3 minutes, which I read as a boner joke. But Mark glitches between his home hallway and the hall that connected the severed floor to Miss Casey's office, and we hear nature sounds that played in her office as she ran those wellness sessions. Her voice continues, your Outie can roller skate with grace. Your Outie pays all the gas and electric bills within 3 business days. Your Outie listens to music while shaving, but not while showering. And now Mark sticks his head into that white-walled hall on the severed floor, which means he would be leaving the hallway that leads to Miss Casey's office, headed back to MDR, and her voice continues, your Outie prefers 2 scoops of ice cream in a serving, but they must be the same flavor, and your Outie once captured a butterfly. And the 2 scoops of ice cream could be a parallel to Mark's innie versus his Outie, and how both men prefer the same flavor of love, ultimately. Mark then turns around, and Gemma / Miss Casey is standing right there.
Your Outie is going to be...
Going to what? Change the world? Burn everything down? Rescue me? And an episode titled Trojan's Horse, as in something that seems like an invasive gift to bring down a castle, but is actually, in this context, a double blind from the Trojan himself to trick you into trying to trick him and actually get you to give him something that will not actually hurt him. Now I am wondering if Ragabi might actually be under orders from Lumon to haunt Mark with visions of his dead wife so that Mark will be more traumatized with the temper of woe as he finishes Cold Harbor. Cold Harbor, after all, didn't seem to start until after Mark went through the override at the end of last season and the beginning of this season. And that's when he really got incepted with the idea that Gemma might still be alive. So we have to ask, is Ragabi actually helping Mark? Or is this all actually a Trojan's horse? And it's all still going according to Lumon's plan. A huge thanks to Noah Chen for helping research this video. And please support us by joining the channel as a member for ad-free versions of select videos. You can grab a great nerdy gift from our merch store, nerdright.shop. Follow me at EA Voss and subscribe to all the channels in the New Rockstars network for in-depth coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.